budget. Is what budget. In our previous class, I introduced you to what budget it is. But now let us look at what budget is per se. A budget, as defined on your screen, may be defined as a financial statement of a total estimated revenue and proposed expenditure of a government in a given period, usually a year. This word, look at the word here. One is a financial statement. You know what financial statement is? It's a written plan of money that is what spent or to be spent, receive or to be received. That's what we talk about financial word statement. It's a word written statement of account. Has to do with money. It's a financial statement of what estimated revenue. What about estimated revenue is what you are planning to receive as income. So it's a financial statement of what the estimated revenue. You have a plan that as a teacher, and as I have also I have other things doing. Let's assume that as a teacher they will pay me 150,000 at the end of the month. After paying me 150,000 at the end of the month, my business will bring you 150,000. My friend will pay me 300,000 naira that's owing me. All those words that they are what estimated revenue. The month has not ended. They have not paid me the salary. My friends have not paid me the money is owing me. My business, I have not taken my account of business to know my profit. So they are what estimated. They are what planned, expected. So that's why we use what estimated here. They are not actually available now. So it's a financial statement of what you estimated, what revenue, what you plan to receive, and proposed expenditure. Propose what? Expenditure. What about propose? You plan. Propose expenditure. Expenditure means what? Spending. So proposed expenditure, what you plan to spend. Your proposed expenditure is what you planned to spend. That's your proposed expenditure. So assuming that money that I'm expecting now, I will not plan. Okay, we go and buy a new suit, buy a new shoe. I think I will buy a new car. Those are what proposed expenditure. I've not actually spent the money on them, but I'm planning to spend it. Then we have another thing here, government. Why did we use only government here? Please, budget is not limited to government. As a student, you can have a budget of money you plan to receive and spend. As a business person, you can have a budget. As a company, can have a budget. But we use government here because of the topic we are looking. We are looking at public finance. And public finance is about government revenue and expenditure. Exactly, that's why we use government here. Then we talk about a given period, which is usually a year. A budget must have a time frame. All budget has a what time frame. Nigeria as a country will run a what annual budget. Officially, we have annual budget. When the government will present the executive government will present the budget to the what National Assembly for what deliberation and approval to become a law for that will run for that year. Then I say that we have different types of budget. We have 3 types of budget per se: the surplus budget, balanced budget, deficit budget. Some textbook will call it, or some author will call it a budget surplus, balanced budget, and budget deficit. They simply mean the same thing. Whether it's budget surplus or surplus budget, deficit budget or budget deficit, they simply mean what the same thing. The concept remain the same. So that's the 3 types of what budget we have. Then we talk about surplus budget in our previous class, but let me just give you thorough knowledge of it. Budget surplus or surplus budget. This is a situation in which expected government revenue is greater than the expected what revenue. The expected government revenue is what greater than the government what expected expenditure. Look at this picture. So look at what government is receiving: $98.5 billion. Look at what government is spending: $93 billion. So if you look at this budget of California, 2012 to 13, what government is receiving is bigger than what government is spending. That was budget was surplus, or surplus was budget. Whenever the government plans to receive more money than is spending, the government is simply projecting for a was surplus. You know, as an individual, okay, let me use as a student now. When coming to school, your father gave you 500 now to come to school for your snacks and transport, and you spend you plan to spend only, or let us not say you plan now, I want to use the reset situation. You now spend only 100 naira of that money. What you have a surplus of 400 naira. You have a surplus of what 400, because the money you receive as revenue is greater than the money you spend as was expenditure. So when we talk about surplus budget, we talk about a situation where the money that you receive by the government is greater than the money that the government was spent. So if next week now immediately school resume, you are planning that your father will be giving you 500 naira to school every day, and you now plan that for that 500 naira you will spend 100 naira on transportation, you spend 200 naira on snacks, then you have 300 naira remaining. That is what, that your budget is what surplus what budget, or budget was surplus, because what you are receiving as revenue is what 500 naira, and what you plan to spend is just 300 naira. So that's what we call what surplus what budget. You are what receiving more, but you are spending what less, aka aka gum. What are the reasons for budget surplus or surplus budget in a country? The effect of a budget surplus, the effect in an economy is that to contract and reduce the pace and level of economic activity. To contract and reduce the pace of and level of what economic what activity. What about economic activity? If the economic activity is on the high, is very high, there's so much money in circulation. If the money circulation is very high, there's so much economic activity, and government want to reduce the pace a little bit of economic activity, the government will spend less amount of money and collect more money from the people through tax and other means. So when the government is collecting much money from the people, either through tax, borrowing, license and fee, and the government is only spending little amount of money, the amount of money in circulation will reduce, and economic activity will slow down. So that is one of the effects of what budget was surplus. So it's a contractionary fiscal tool. The government can use budget surplus, a contractionary fiscal tool. When talk about contraction, I talk about reducing, to contract, to reduce. So to contract as economic term, government will use the word budget support to contract the economy, to reduce the economic activity. Another effect of budget surplus is to control inflation. To control inflation. And inflation is a situation where the total amount of money in circulation is greater than when the total amount of money in circulation is greater than the amount of goods in circulation. That, for the layman perspective, to a large extent, the amount of goods is greater than the amount of money in circulation is greater than the amount of goods. That is, it's a situation where too much money is chasing few goods. Too much money is chasing few goods. That the amount of money in circulation is very high, but the amount of goods in the economy is very low. So there will be inflation. The amount of goods will be increasing. Let's take an example. Have you ever thought it that if the government print 1 million naira and give to everybody in this country, what will be the effects? I think you'll be happy. I'll be happy. But look at the real effect economically. If the government give everybody 1 million naira, no, I will not come and start teaching you again in your school. I'll go and find something doing. Okay, so you see all the teachers might retire, isn't it? The person that is hawking pure water along the streets will stop selling pure water. Okay. The person that is working as a pub attendant at the filling station will stop working as a pub attendant, isn't it? Now, what will happen now at the end of the day? Everybody will stop doing whatever they are doing. Now, the person that managed to agree to work, the person will say that you will pay me like 300,000 to start teaching in your school. The pub attendant that managed to say that you want to work, it will be demanded for 200,000 naira for payment. So the price of everything will now increase, because the money circulation is greater than the amount of goods and services available. So for government to tackle such a problem, the government will now introduce surplus budget. The government will not tax people heavily, collect a lot of money from this economy, and spend only little. So the amount of money in circulation will now reduce again. So it will now help to fight the inflation, which is persistent rise in the price of goods and services. Then let's talk about budget deficit. Budget deficit is the opposite of budget surplus. or surplus budget. So deficit is the what opposite, and it's a situation in which expected revenue is lesser than expected what expenditure. Government deficit, talk about a situation whereby the government revenue, that the expected revenue is lesser than the government expected what expenditure. Okay, let us go back to the previous analogy. Your parents gave you 500 naira to come to school, and you plan to use 200 naira for transport, you plan to use 300 naira for snacks, and you plan to give your friend 100 naira. What is the effect? That's deficit. Your money is not enough to what finance that what project. So what about deficit? Your expenditure is greater than your revenue. So that is what deficit. I will teach you how to finance deficit budget. When the government plans to spend more than it's receiving, the government is already running a deficit budget. How to finance it, I will teach you. Nigeria budget most of the time is a deficit budget. The government spend more than it would receive. Look at this picture on your screen. The expenditure is more than the government what revenue. That's why the expenditure is coming down. It's pulling the what tax up. It's pulling what government revenue what up. So this is what a deficit what budget. In short, look at somebody under a cartoon under. This is, look at it. It's what pressing on the person heavily. That's the effect of budget deficit what budget. It pressed on the government heavily. It's very what, it's a difficult economic budget to run because the expenditure is more than your revenue. Assuming your parents now, their salary at the end of the month, your father and your mother is 300,000 naira, and what they spend every month is 450,000 naira. How will they feel? It will crush on them. It will be a strong effect on them. That's what deficit what budget. That's why this thing is shouting here. He wants to die. So much you go and save it. So deficit budget, the expenditure is greater than the what revenue. What is the effect on the economy? They are one. It increases the pace and level of economic activity. It increases the pace and level of what economic activity. When the economy is in the stage of deflation or recession. Deflation or recession. Recession is the advanced stage of inflation. So when the economy is in recession, there is no economic activity per se. The amount of money circulation is very low. What the government will do to tackle it is the government will spend more money, release more money into the what economy, and by so doing, the total amount of money circulation will what increase, and economic activity what increase. Recently, I think some days ago, I was just by my door, just observing the environment. Then there was a public announcement along the Ukpo Road that the government is giving out loan. No, that some person should, people that want the loan should come to one of the filling stations along the road. Why did the government choose to give that out loan if it is true? Look at the reason. It has been projected that Nigeria is going to hit a very high recession level. That the recession that Nigeria is going to experience very soon is very high, and it will be the highest form of recession Nigeria has faced in the past 30 years. So what government is simply doing, they are finding a means to what prevent this what recession by ensuring that there is much money in circulation, and if there is much money in circulation, there will be more production of goods and services, and this will now make people to be more engaged. Hence, people will be employed, and the forecasted recession will drop. So, if the government want to ensure that there is much economic activity, what the government will simply do, the government will what pump more money into the economy than it's receiving, and by so doing, the government is what involving in what budget what deficit. It also used to what it can lead to inflation also. This budget deficit can lead to what inflation. When the government is pumping money into the economy just like that, and it's not withdrawing from the economy, there will be too much money in the economy, and this will not make price of goods and services to what increase. So a budget deficit is expansionary in nature. It's what expansionary in nature. That is, By expansionary, it increases economic activity, while a budget surplus is contractionary in what nature. Then the last one is balanced budget. Balanced what? Budget. When we talk about balanced budget, we talk about a situation in which the expected government revenue is equal to the expected government expenditure. But before we talk about balanced budget, let me just go back a little bit. How does government finance budget deficit? What government is receiving is small, but what is spending is what? High. So one of the tools government use to finance budget deficit or deficit budget is called deficit financing. It's called what? Deficit financing. And one of the major tools there is what? Loan. The government can collect what? Loan. That's what Nigeria government did recently. They collected loan from the World Bank, collected loan for Paris Club, and they collected loan from the International Monetary Fund to finance the what? Budget. So one of the ways to finance budget deficit is to what? Loan from the what? Different what? Organization, either private, internal loan or external loan. So back to where we were. Balanced budget. We talk about the situation where the expected government revenue is equal to the expected government what? Expenditure. What government plan to spend is equal to what government plan to what? Receive. That is what we refer to as what? Balanced what? Budget. If you are giving 500 naira to school, you are planning that your parents will give you 500 naira to school, and you plan to spend that 500 naira before that 500 naira when you come to school, that 500 naira expenditure is equal to the 500 naira expenses. So that is a what? Balanced what? Budget. When government revenue is equal to what? Government expenditure. Look at it here. Revenue weight is equal to expenditure weight. So the budget is what? Balance. The budget is what? Balance. That was called to balance what? Budget. But there's an economic effect of a balanced budget. When we proceed, we look at the balanced budget multiplier. The balanced budget multiplier. That is in our subsequent class. So thank you for being part of the class. God bless you. Have a nice day and stay safe.